What's up, Internet? It's Matt at Overkill Woodcraft, and today I'm going to show you how I made this rifle rack. As you can see, I have 4 in there, but it can be easily modified to include more or less depending on your needs. This video is probably a little bit longer than I would have liked it to be, but that's because there's some extra features on this that I went ahead and added, such as this nice storage below. And then there's also the ability to add a lock to each rifle if you choose. Then there's just a ton of general tips and tricks from me as far as how I do woodworking. So stick around and I'll show you how I did it. For this build, I'll be using some old growth pine that I milled up a while ago. And they're just 1x6s that I ended up ripping down to 5 inches wide. And then I planed everything to about 3/4 inches thick. So essentially any 1x6 material will do. I'll leave the final dimensions for my specific rifle rack down in the description, but I just left myself some excess because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to add storage on the bottom at first. So I just cut my sides to about 35 inches and then the horizontal components to about 30 inches. So now that I have all of my lumber milled up, the way I'm going to go about doing the sides is I decided to make a template just out of this thinner, it's about 1/4 inch plywood, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did that. It involves a little bit of trial and error and quite a few measurements, but it's pretty straightforward. And once I get this all cut out, it'll make the rest of the project and actually making the sides go a lot smoother, and I'll be able to use this template to help when I'm using my flush trim bit on my router. So for starters, this piece is 5 inches wide, which is how wide the sides are going to be. So I'll just be able to lay it right down on top. But the first thing that I did was I took a combination square and I marked a 1.5 inch line down this entire backside. Okay, and that gave me something to reference off of for when I was doing my circles and the rest of this. So I took the speed square and I started at the top, and I just left a little bit of space up there because I wasn't sure how much I was going to need. So I ended up leaving, this is just about an inch and a quarter of space up here, but that's completely up to you and what you might want to do for any sort of decorative design here. And I drew my 45-degree line. Then I went down 2 7/8. I did a notch, took my 45-degree line. Then I kind of had to determine, and this is where it took some trial and error, was figuring out how much space I wanted between the bottom of a rifle and the top of it. And what I kind of ended up settling on was about 6 inches. I think that'll give me plenty of space, even if I have like a heavier or a bulkier scope on one of them. So after my 2 7/8 between this top 45-degree line and my bottom 45-degree line, I then referenced my bottom 45-degree line. I did 3 1/4, and then I marked another notch. And then I just repeated that. So another 2 7/8, did a notch, 3 1/4, did a notch. Again, that would be the top, and so on and so forth. And obviously this can be repeatable or multiplied depending on how many rifles you might be wanting to store. So once I had all of my 45 degrees lines drawn, and this would have these would have been drawn out completely, I had to figure out, I wanted my openings in here to be 2 inches because I've got some beefier rifles and they have beefier stocks on them. So this is what I came up with. This is a dust extractor connection for one of my hoses. And this ended up being a perfect 2 inches. So I then traced around, did my 2-inch holes on all of these. And of course I wanted to round this bottom part. So for that I simply flipped it, rounded that. And this next part is extra if you decide to. I took a 1/2 inch Forster bit and just kind of used that to score the plywood so I could then trace along the outsides. And what that'll allow for is the little added bonus safety feature of this if I want to actually lock up these rifles. I've got plenty of these long kind of cable locks. I mean, obviously, it's not as secure as being in a gun safe, but it'll definitely slow somebody down, or stop your child from trying to access these. Which, of course, they should be up there unloaded anyways. Now, something odd that I did do was I have a lever action rifle, and there is no way that that's going to fit in a 2-inch opening. So I left this top piece. You can kind of see where my original pencil marks were. I had originally just decided to kind of round over this edge, and that was going to be kind of the decorative ending to it. And then this is obviously not as steep as a 45 degree. I think I just want like a 60 degree line on here to give it some decorative effect. But what I ended up doing here was I just went with kind of a an L shape. That way, this will be open, and I could fit that lever action rifle in there no problem. And just kind of did another slight angle on there, and I'll end up rounding this over. The last thing worth noting is down here below this hole, I left myself about 6 inches of clearance because I would like to have some sort of shelves here, and maybe even have a nice little door with piano hinges on it. At the time that I'm filming this, I'm obviously still not sure yet, but you saw what the end product is. So the thing with this template that I'm getting at is, if you're not sure what you want to do, if you just want to end this completely and not have any shelves or whatever, is you can still do the bulk of the work here and decide all of that later. And once I have the sides cut out and I kind of have the mock pieces clamped together, and I can tell what my rifles are going to look like on there and how much space I have, that'll probably determine what I ultimately end up doing with this space. I'm just saying you can leave your options open. So I'm going to go ahead and start on this template, and I will start with the easy holes, the little 1/2-inch holes for the safety lock. And now onto the 2-inch holes. And because this is probably the easiest solution here versus using my bandsaw right now, I'm just going to cut the bulk of this out, if not all of it, on my scroll saw. Yeah, I mean, not bad for a scroll saw. Went ahead and got my template all cleaned up. And while this old growth pine is about as pretty as pine gets, I would still like to avoid some of these knots, which is why I left some excess on my sides when I was milling everything up. I'm going to go ahead and mark this to length here. Cut that on the miter saw. I'm not worried about any excess up top right now because I'll just trim around all that. So I've got those cut to length, and now it is time for some trusty double-sided tape. A little definitely goes a long way here, but this template is going to be on here for the long haul, basically everything that I'm doing to get this roughed out. So definitely going to overkill it just a little bit, but I'm also not trying to snap this template when I rip it off of this plywood. So definitely got to find that nice happy medium. Rub all that on there really good. Make sure it's not going anywhere. All right, I've got all that off. I'll flip it over. Make sure I don't screw this up. It's feeling pretty flush on the back. All right, we're ready to hog out the bulk of this material. One minor downside to using the scroll saw for this is if you don't have perfect cuts, it can leave little peaks that can create a catch when you're using the flush trim bit. So just be sure to smooth those out if you decide to go with this method. Well, that went pretty well. Let's hope that this next part does, and that's taking off this double-sided tape without ruining the template. There we go. Template's intact. I'm going to get this double-sided tape off and then rinse and repeat and do the same exact thing for the next side. And for the sake of time on this video, I will do that off camera. All right, so I have both of my sides finished, for the most part. So now my next step is going to be cutting my bottom shelf and my French cleat to length. My French cleat for this is going to go on the back, but I'm going to notch in here, and you'll see how that comes together in a minute. But I'm going to cut these to the same length because my bottom shelf is just going to go on the bottom this way. I'm not going to bring it that way. So I'm going to cut these two to length, and the length is going to be 25 inches. And then because I'm kind of a ground truth type of guy when it comes to making things, I will wait to cut this, we'll just call it the top shelf, and that'll fit perfectly in here. So I'm going to cut my bottom shelf and my French cleat. All right, so I have those two cut. And now what I'm going to do is just get my inside width for my top shelf by just placing these two on here. And then taking my top shelf and butting it up nice and flush on the sides. And then I'll go ahead and just mark it on the bottom, make my cut that way. Now the French cleat for the wall is going to end up being in between these two. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that a little bit more narrow than my top shelf, because I don't really care if there's a little bit of a gap or a little bit of wiggle room. I'd rather have some wiggle room than have it be too snug in there when I go to, put the finished gun rack up and hang it on the wall. So now that I have my components cut, things are going to get a little weird. What I would like to do when I'm mounting this, because it's going to be carrying a considerable amount of weight, so I would like my French cleat to go in like this and actually be, like inserted into here. But of course the problem is, we've got this 45-degree angle for the cleat, so I essentially need to cut the width off of just the 45-degree angle part. And so how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take an offcut here. So I'm going to get this here nice and flush, then just mark where I'm going to need to cut my little notch out of here. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So now this is essentially what I have to cut out on both sides. Once I have that done, that will allow me to make a dado that's this width, which is about 3 inches. So, and since my scroll saw has been treating me so nicely, I'm going to use it to make these notches. They're definitely not going to come out perfect. I might have to, finesse it a little bit, fine tune it, but it'll work. So it actually ended up better than I thought it would. Now what I need to figure out is where I want this French cleat to be, just to give it a little bit of extra something to bite into. I think this will work kind of centered down here in between, in the middle of this holder. So that brings me only about 4 inches from the top anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark around here, nice and defined, okay? So now I'm going to double-sided tape these together, and I will take it to my dado and cut that out. And I'm just going to use the French cleat itself to kind of dial this in to the proper height. All right, that brought it to just about perfect. There's just a tiny little lip sticking off, tiny. So that'll probably be cleaned up just when I, flatten out, smooth out my dado here. And of course, I'll be sanding this one last time. That's a really good snug fit. So right now I essentially have the components of this rifle rack dry fitted, and I was concerned that this next part would be an issue, and that is my spacing here with these, specifically kind of the angle. So if something like this beautiful vintage Model 54 Winchester 30-06, it's not really working out too well because there's just the way this angle is, the buttstock and everything. I thought it wouldn't be as much of an issue, and I could fit it in here, but the way this scope is and the way I have it all dialed in, my scope is in the way. So if I were to give it a little bit more space here, and that's not even the only one. So it's the same issue with this lever action, the buttstock. I was thinking just because it doesn't want to rest down here perfectly, it doesn't want to, and even with gravity, if I were to stand this up, the barrel is still not going to want to rest down in the bottom of these grooves. So I essentially just need to carve out another little slot or another, kind of a chunk out of here to make it fit. This design with, kind of the more 45-degree angle slots, it works perfectly for something more along these lines. But I really only plan on putting something along these lines in this rifle rack. It's mainly going to be, hunting type rifles. So I'll show you my solution that I have. But before I get to that, another potential issue I'm going to have is I wanted to put a cubby in here. I even cut the extra slots and everything for it, but I'm not sure if it's going to fit. Once I get these other slots that I'm about to show you cut out, I might be able to fit a cubby in here, but I won't know that until, again, I have my slots cut out and I have everything dry fitted again. So my solution for making those rifle stocks fit a little better, and at the same time, ideally not completely ruining not only the structural integrity of this design, but the aesthetics of it. I don't want it looking ridiculous. Is this? I basically created just this little kind of 90-degree notch I'm going to take out. And how I did that was I came up to the back of my circle with my 1.5 inches, because that's how deep that goes. And I just drew a line, and I kind of, when I had a rifle in there, I measured about 3.25 inches from the bottom. I kind of just put a tick mark on there, measured it out, and it ended up being about 3.25 inches from the bottom. So I went ahead and I marked that off. Then I just used a square, drew that line, made it to where the two intersected, and I had a 90. And then I took, again, my dust collection fitting, put that on there, and just drew a line around it. And then I just kind of rounded over this edge here. So I think it'll look halfway decent when I take that out. And this should still be more than enough, wood and meat there to hold something as heavy as a rifle. So what I'm going to do next is double-sided tape these two together. I'm not going to, take out the template and everything again. I'm going to leave the template as is because, I might want to make another rifle rack that's more suited towards tactical rifles eventually. So I'm going to leave that template as is because this design works great for them. But yeah, so I'm just going to double-sided tape these together, and then I'll just take this to the scroll saw. If you don't have a spindle sander like me, one of these little kits will definitely come in handy in weird situations like this. After smoothing out those new notches, I just gave everything a tiny round over and then just did some initial sanding at 120. So now that those notches are cut out, I went ahead and kind of clamped this together to my bench and staged it like it would be up on the wall. And speaking of the wall, it's going above a dresser, and I wanted to fit these 4 rifles in this rack. So, I only had so much like vertical space, and I did think about doing a vertical rack instead of this horizontal style. But I just felt like this would fit better in the space anyways, and it would just look better. and kind of just fit my needs better. So where, everything fits in here now that I've got this done. And I'll just say that it fits. Is it perfect? Probably not. If I had more wall space, I would have put more space in between each rifle. And then that would eliminate kind of some of the awkwardness if I'm, going to grab one rifle over the other. If I were to lose this tactical rifle, that would eliminate a lot of my problems. But I definitely want that one going up there. So it is what it is. It'll work, and who knows? Maybe one day I'll make a different one. And like I said, just devote this one to strictly some of the tactical rifles that I have, and keep it in a different location. The good thing about this is that as long as my strap is out of the way, I will have space for just a little cubby down here. So I'm going to go ahead and incorporate that too, because it's something I wanted to do. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. I could still put whatever I want on this, bottom shelf. But what I'll end up doing instead is moving this bottom shelf, which is actually meant to be the top shelf, to right about here, which will give me about, I think a 4.5-inch cubby. And then I have a bottom shelf that will go underneath here. And then just a little drawer front or door front, whatever you would want to call it, that I'm going to put some piano hinges on, and that'll fold out, and I can just, stash some ammunition or whatever. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with this design. All right, so it's time to assemble this, and this should be the most straightforward part of this build. So what I've done is gone ahead and clamped these in place, made sure everything is perfectly square. All right, so I've got it flipped over now, and to alleviate some of the work on my end, I brought out some of my corner clamps to keep these two sides nice and parallel. And now I'm just going to drop some glue in here on the French cleat, and go ahead and countersink it as well. And of course, you want to make sure you get your French cleat plate placement, that's a tongue twister, right, as far as how you're going to have it on the wall. So while I'm waiting for this frame to just kind of finish up drying, my next step anyways is that I'm going to go ahead and attach these piano hinges. They're going to fold in like so. This will be the front of the door, and that'll just kind of allow me to get a nice little flush close on the back here where that kind of cubby is going to be. So I'm going to attach these, and I'm just going to go ahead and space each one of them about, I don't know, 1.75 inches from the outside of the door front. And I definitely recommend self-centering drill bit when you're using piano hinges. It makes life so much easier. So I'm just going to rinse and repeat and do that on the other side. So now I want to take these piano hinges and I want to attach them in here. I'm just going to, temporarily secure them again with only the two outside screws. And the reason why I'm going to do that now is because it'll be much easier to do it now versus when I have this top shelf in place. So I'm just going to remove the guts here. And I'm not going to lie, I have a hard time getting these when they're awkward like this, when you're not able to use the back of the piano hinge to go ahead and reference the surface. Sometimes I have a hard time getting them flush. So a little trick that I use is I will just get it lined up to where it needs to be. And then this is the tricky part, is keeping the hinge down on the other side, flush with the surface. Just kind of use like a mechanical pencil. You can get some extra length on the tip of your lead. Just kind of use that as a reference. I'll do the same thing as the other side. So now when I drop this down, I've got a reference line. I'm going to go ahead and attach these. Just get equal space on each side. And now I'm going to use that to help me adjust here, get me lined up with my reference line that I ticked right here before. I'm going to test this out. So that ended up flush with here, and it also ended up flush on the other side. Now for this next step, I'm going to attach my top shelf. And how I'm going to do that is just with these two offcuts that I cut to 4.5 inches tall, because that's the space I want in between here. And that will work out perfectly for my drawer front or door front. So I'm going to take this out. And then I'm just going to go ahead and mark what will end up being the bottom of that top shelf. All right, and then I'm going to flip this, do that on the other side. All right, now I'm going to put my spacers back in. And then I am going to put some glue on the sides here. And for a little added security, I'm going to clamp this down, and that'll keep it in there nice and snug. And I'm only doing 2 screws on the outside here. Took my clamps off, I took those spacers out, and now I'm just, the last step here to go ahead and attach these magnetic stops. It would be nice if I could just attach one of these up here, but obviously I've got a limited amount of space to work with, so it's going to be kind of difficult. So I'll attach one of these to each side, and how I do that's really simple. You just want to make sure that the receiving portion of this magnetic catch is depressed, not mentally speaking, depressed, pressed in. I think you get what I'm saying. And then you'll close your door to where you want it, nice and flush. And I will mark my holes on the receiver portion. Okay, I'll attach that. And then I'll go ahead, open up my door. And then on the back of this magnet, I'll put this clear double-sided tape that I have. And I will put that onto the receiver. And I'll just push it in a little bit more. And that'll attach right to it. So then when I pull my door off, the magnet is there, and then all what I have to do is, attach a screw and secure it. Got the magnetic latches attached, and obviously it'll be secured to the wall, but I mean the action really isn't going to get any smoother than that. Pretty happy with that. So now I'm going to take everything apart as far as just these piano hinges, and I'm going to take those magnetic latches off, and then I'm going to go ahead and just do some final sanding, just really the fine-tuned stuff, and then I'll wipe everything down with mineral spirits, and then I'll paint it all black. Well, there you have it, the finished product hanging up on the wall. I think it looks pretty good, painted black, and it goes with all my furniture. But of course, you can do whatever you want with yours. One extra thing I did go ahead and do was a while ago, I ordered, I'll leave a link down in the description if you want, but I ordered a huge roll of neoprene foam, this stuff, and it just has adhesive on one side. And it's come in handy for just a ton of little projects. You can use it for furniture pads and protect the paint on your wall with certain things. But I just went ahead and I cut little thin strips of this and just placed it in to, each of the curves to not just protect the rifle, but just, keep the paint chipping off and everything over time. So that's optional. And then, of course, I add my logo to the front. But all in all, a couple of hiccups along the way as far as figuring out the proper design. But in the end, I think it worked out pretty well because, like I said, not only can you hold hunting rifles up here, but you can also hold tactical rifles, no problem. Kind of a jack of all trades for, rifle racks, if you will. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'm always happy to answer them, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.